Hello everyone, Hyper here, and in today's video I will be sharing some tips with you to make your leveling from 110 to 120 significantly quicker. Now, the first part of this video will be general tips that anyone can use regardless of the spec or class you play. Then the second part will be specific to Death Knights. Before we even get started, I wanted to mention that using these tips won't take anything away from your leveling experience. It will just reduce the time it takes to get from 110 to 120. So if this is your first time leveling, you can go ahead and use these tips and you're not going to be missing out on any of the story quests or anything like that. Let's get started with the general tips. The first thing you will want to do is complete all of the storyline quests and scenarios that are available throughout the pre-patch, because these are required for you to go ahead and level throughout BFA. The second thing you will want to do is of course stock up on consumables. This means flasks, food, utility items such as gun shoes, skystep potions, and goblin gliders. Goblin gliders are especially useful, especially if you're leveling as Horde, because a lot of the zones have very high mountains that you can glide off from, and it saves a lot of time when moving between settlements that are, for example, opposite on mountains of each other. For the achievement Big Race Roadhog, which there are plenty of guides out there on how to do it, you get an item called the Checkered Flag. And you can only gain this one time per character, so if you've done it in the past and you already had the item and you used it, then you're out of luck. But in case you haven't, then you can get this item, and what it does, it has 50 charges and it will give you 30% mounted movement speed for 10 minutes. So you can essentially have 30% increased mounted movement speed throughout your entire leveling experience. So it just reduces the time that you spend running between quest hubs. Also at the Darkmoon Fair, you can ride the Darkmoon Carousel, which will give you an experience buff that lasts 1 hour. However, if you get this experience buff, for example on Saturday night before the Darkmoon Fair expires, then you can go over to Silithus, to Magni, where you will be getting the next quest, and just log out until BFA actually launches on Monday or Tuesday if you're in EU. And this means that once you log back in, for the first hour of leveling, you will have the experience buff. And it's not that big of a change, but since you already have access to it, why not do it? The next thing you want to do is turn War Mode on in one of your capital cities. And this is especially useful because you gain access to 3 new PvP talents, and these can either increase your output or increase your survivability, either way making leveling a lot easier and less stressful. If you're worried about the opposite faction ganking you, I wouldn't be too worried about that, because the first day or two, you're not very likely to encounter the opposite faction in the zones where you're leveling, since the zones for Alliance and Horde are separated on 2 different continents, and the only way to get from one to the other is the storyline quests that most people will only do once they actually reach max level. This next tip is especially useful if you're leveling in a group with your guild members. Battle standards can be purchased at a guild vendor, and they provide either 15, 10, or 5% bonus experience to you and nearby guild members. And you can drop these, they have a 10-minute cooldown and a 2-minute shared cooldown. So you can drop a 15% one, then wait 2 minutes, then drop your 10% one, wait 2 minutes, and drop your 5% one. And then you have to wait for the full cooldown until your first one is back up. But if you're leveling with a group of people, which I know many of you probably are, then you can rotate these whenever you're doing big pulls to significantly increase your experience gain from killing those enemies. For jewel crafters out there, or if you know people who have jewel crafting, you can make a 5% bonus experience gem pretty early on in the expansion. And as long as you mine a little bit here and there, you can send these materials to your friend, or if you're a jewel crafter yourself, you can make the pattern yourself. And 5% bonus experience might not sound like much, but once you stack it on top of everything else, 5% actually turns out to be a pretty decent amount through 10 levels. The last thing you will want to do is sort out your UI, your weak auras, and your add-ons. So you will want to update everything before you log in on leveling day or release day, just to make sure that there's no hiccups with any of your add-ons. And through this, you have to make sure that your UI is working properly, so you have everything set up, that way you don't really have to mess around with it while you're leveling. As far as weak auras go, I made my own set that kind of give me a reminder of the utility items I have available to me. Because if you haven't leveled with these items before, you're probably not very used to pressing them on cooldown. So having a little reminder that maybe you have your gun shoes active or your skystep potion, can go a long way to actually increase the speed of your leveling. Along with weak auras, I recommend downloading the add-on called Azeroth Autopilot. And especially if this is your first time leveling, it will give you a very well optimized questing path that will take you through the main storylines as well as some of the more efficient side quests. And if you're worried about missing out on the story, you can go to the Azeroth Autopilot settings with /AAP and actually disable the settings which skip cutscenes or auto-turning quests. So that way you're still able to, watch all of that and get the lore and get the story, but it will give you a good path and actually show you what to do throughout the questing experience. Next, moving on to specific Death Knight tips. First of all, what spec should you level as? I will be leveling as Frost for the most part. However, if you do dungeons, I recommend swapping to Unholy, because in dungeons, Unholy actually has time to ramp up the damage and dish it out, whereas in outdoor content or world content, most things die fast enough, whereas Unholy you won't really have time to ramp, so Frost is much more beneficial for this. And if you're leveling in a large group, so 4 or 5 people, and you're already past level 115 I would say, I definitely recommend swapping to Blood. So what build should you use? For Frost, I just go for maximum AoE, because as a Frost DK, I can pull a pretty big amount of mobs and still live due to the free death strikes that you get whenever you kill a target. So I will be going with Inexorable Assault, Murderous Efficiency, Asphyxiate, Frostbite, Permafrost, Glacial Advance, and Obliteration. For PvP talents, I will be using Tundra Stalker, Frozen Center, and for the third talent, you can either go with Overpowered Rune Weapon or Necrotic Aura. For legendaries and trinkets, I prefer using movement speed legendaries, so Sephuz and Agramar's Stride, because most enemies die very quickly if you have decent gear, so you don't really need the extra damage that the legendaries provide, rather you need their utility. Sephuz can be procced on cooldown by Remorseless Winter, Asphyxiate, and Death Grip, so if you have a weak aura that tracks whenever Sephuz is available to you, you can maximize its uptime and basically have it up for almost the entire time you're leveling. For trinkets, I prefer using the Pantheon trinket along with Dimas if I'm doing large pulls, or if you're kind of taking your time and just killing mobs 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, then you can use trinkets like Shadow Singed Fang or Seeping Scourgewing. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you have any additional tips, you can leave them in the comment section below and I will make sure to pin them. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and sub to the channel. Again, thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.